Steve, I don't want the answer to be that, you did a fucking shitload of shots one night in college. I think that's been in every episode now. So highlight a great risk you took in your life. Why was it such a great risk? What did you learn?
He's like, let me tell you about the night before. I took a lot of shots then too.
Yeah. Well, my biggest risk was probably when I just left my job and went to New Zealand for a while. my friend was living in New Zealand, so I just met up with him there in Queenstown. I ended up being there for like a month.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got a job for Greenpeace to travel around as a traveling campaign outreacher.
That sounds super sweet.
So I got paid to travel around New Zealand, like signing people up for Greenpeace, and I lived in a van.
Down by the river?
Down by multiple rivers. So I got to see like pretty much every town in New Zealand by just living in a van and traveling around working for Greenpeace. So I did that for a few months. So that was probably the biggest risk I've ever taken, and it was the most tremendous experience I've ever had, too.
That'd be pretty liberating.
Oh, yeah.
I read an article about this married couple, and they got rid of all their possessions except for their car, and they just lived out of their car for a year. And they had a gym membership so they could shower and whatnot, and they said it was like the best year of their life. No worries, all the stress was gone.
That's a good idea, having a gym membership so you work out and you can shower anywhere.
It's also the homeless person trick, but
yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
And then, if you're finished.
I'm done.
All right. I have really bad answers for this one. So I'm excited about
Good way to preface it.
Yep. For me, the biggest thing I'd say, at least in recent times, was turning down job offers in the field where I had experience. That felt like a big risk at the time, but it feels a lot like it paid off a lot right now. Meaning that, my whole background, I've been finance and accounting for 7+ years, for about 7 years, I guess. But, then everybody that was a recruiter was like, oh, here, I've got this finance job, I've got this accounting job, you have this experience, and yeah, you can get that. I was like, not that they were handing out jobs, but meaning like everybody was trying to encourage me to at least pursue them. And then even a couple offers I turned down, and it ended up being that I got this new job, which I decided I really liked quite a bit. I really love it a lot more than accounting and finance, which I found, and some people, it's perfect for them. People picking and tying everything, they love accounting, but for me, it's just not my passion. And I've really enjoyed this job that I'm doing a lot more, so I'm very glad that I waited. So that would be probably a recent risk for me. Jonathan?
My turn?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now. It's John on the birth certificate.
Is it really?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me for this.
But the name on the birth certificate isn't the real you.
Oh.
It isn't. And I'm a junior, and I've always hated the fact that I'm a junior.
That's my slave name.
It really is.
Oh. Okay.
Can you think of another way of being less of a, I don't want to say person, but
Mini job?
an individual than being a junior? As soon as you're out of the womb, you're always already tied to something else.
Yeah.
Little job.
In a shadow.
Yeah, oh man, I got called JJ for John Jr. and my dad calls me Junior all the time, and just a bunch of stuff. It's listen, I'm my own person. Come on now.
Yeah.
Biggest risk for me.
Nice segue.
I like to just jump into things sometimes. Doesn't always work out.
That's a quick therapy session we just had. Sorry, okay.
Yeah, I might as well just go live in the woods instead of have to kill myself.
Yeah,
Or have
see?
a name.
Yeah, instead of have the name. I would say moving back to New Hampshire after the military. My family lives in South Carolina now, and there was a lot of pressure on that front to move down there. And when I made the decision to come back up here, there really wasn't much going on for me. And I'll admit I originally moved back for the wrong reasons.
Was it for Bob?
It was for Bob. He's such a tender lover. But no, just the usual woman and whatnot. Anywho,
She's the worst, whoever she is. Sorry.
see you
go
next
on.
Tuesday.
Yeah, okay.
But anywho, yeah, so I moved back for the wrong reasons, and for a while it was definitely beating down that, nothing had worked out how it was supposed to. But then I got to meet you lovely gentlemen and got to start this process, and working on this has been enjoyable.
Once you see Steve's nipples,
So
everything
they're like sausage patties.
right in the world, yeah. Well, pancakes, I'd say, but
Orangutan titties, that's also a good
dinner
one.
plates.
Oh god.
So I'm sorry, you were saying?
Marcus? We know you have a lot of mistakes.
Risks.
What would you
Risks?
consider a risk? Yeah, what would you consider your biggest risk?
I started my first business while I was married with 2 kids. So that's certainly pretty significant financial risk.
Yeah.
My first and last early retirement, letting go largely of all possessions and driving for 6 months. That was a pretty big risk and had a lot of ramifications. Pissed a lot of people off. It depended on me, but it was definitely the happiest I've been in a long time. So, I don't know. I learned that you might want to wait a little bit longer till you got retirement planned out a little better than just retiring. As far as the business, that was a great process. What I learned from my first business was managing cash flow. Just because you got a customer in the sights and about to close the deal, oftentimes it can be 6 months beyond that. Same with investors. A lot of times entrepreneurs think they've got somebody right there, they're interested. Even by the time they open their checkbook, by the time all the lawyers and other douchebags are involved, you've got another 3 to 6 months before a check clears the bank account that you can actually draw funds upon. And that's what I always try to impress upon people is when will money actually be available in your account? You can withdraw from it. That's a big gap usually. So those are my learnings. What do you guys think of the next one? Do you think great entrepreneurs are great risk takers or risk mitigators?
Definitely risk takers. And because they're people who aren't afraid to try new things. And I've been listening to, on a lot of podcasts, that guy Peter Diamandis, who's he's a really prolific entrepreneur. And he has repeatedly said that the people that are creating all of this innovation are entrepreneurs. They're the small startups that are taking the great risks to create and breed the innovation that we're seeing today. And in terms of risk mitigation, I think that's the old paradigm. It's the old way of doing things. So that's like your corporate people that play it safe and are conservative because it doesn't benefit them to take risks. They want to keep everything safe. And actually that mentality of mitigating risk it's kind of against the nature of the universe because the universe we live in, it's in a state of constant flux. It's constantly shifting and changing. So to try to keep everything in a safe vacuum or a bubble goes against the nature of the reality we exist in. So entrepreneurs take risks and leverage that state of constant flux instead of trying to keep everything in a bubble while everything's changing.
I would buy some of what you're saying. I like what you said, but the fact that you exist and we all exist today, it's been shown that in evolution, our ancestors were actually risk mitigators, not the crazy risk takers. Those people didn't make it. So
That
there's
was-
flip side to,
But that was
the
the
coin.
that was the past though. We've climbed Maslow's hierarchy a bit. So when it comes to fighting tigers and, scrambling for survival and trying to eat on a daily basis, yes, risk mitigation might be more important for survival. But when it comes to where we're at now, on our path to continued evolution, I think that risk taking is more beneficial. Because we have our needs pretty much set right now.
See, I would say, before we pass this up, that actually, it's a very tough one to answer. It's both, but when you run a company, you have a lot of responsibility for other people and their families and jobs. So I actually think risk mitigation is very important, because if you're taking too many risks, you're not taking everybody else's lives, pay, houses, all those things into account. So if you're being careless, and I think we romanticize that everybody's taking a lot of risks these days, because people start businesses that they don't have a revenue model. They'll figure it out later because of the funding they have. But really, there haven't been many quantum leaps in quite some time. Everybody's adding improvements on the same shit. Smartphone. And it's now this gimmick and that gimmick, and everything's an added gimmick. But I don't see really big quantum risks being taken.
What about like the things that Elon Musk is doing?
You guys are killing all my answers.
All right, let's move on. Let's move to
So my answer is a mix of both, which includes an example about Elon Musk.
Yeah.
But I think it really, for me at least, I think it is a mix of both, which, but I think it also depends on the business. So, for example, if you're an investor, for example, you're going to be an excellent risk mitigator. But even outside of investing in like that very, sort of straightforward financial world, I think risk mitigation is, extremely important. And someone like, for example, Warren Buffett, I guess I would say. I mean, he basically just says, rule number 1, don't lose money. And rule number 2, see rule number 1. Like that. So, I mean, it's like, that's what they keep talking about. It's just don't lose is basically the answer. And that's how they end up winning so much over time and consistently. When you win and win and win, that ends up being a humongous $120,000 share sort of win.
Well, you think about it, as whether you're a household or a business, if you have a burn rate, that's only sustainable for so long.
Right.
If you're at least cash flow neutral or slightly positive, you got a way to go.
Yeah.
You can outlast a lot.
So actually, now that I'm thinking about this Elon Musk example, he's actually probably a good example of a mix of both, because he takes these huge risks saying, I'm going to change the world and actually push forward this electric car idea, right, for example. I mean, you go to SpaceX and all this other stuff, but let's just say he's taken this huge, huge risk on, betting on electric cars. But he's also mitigating that risk by A, using other people's money and just convincing them, hey, it's a good idea. B, he's also doing things like he built that huge, huge battery factory. It was some like unbelievable, like $1 billion factory. And he like just farmed that out and said, hey, which one of you states can give me the best tax break? And so he's mitigating his risk because people are desperate to get all those jobs in the high-tech industry and the publicity. And so he ended up getting like this sweet deal that mitigated a lot of the risk of spending so much money on investing in such a critical technology. So I think he is a very good example of an entrepreneur, maybe the epitome of entrepreneur, and he's also a good example of a mix of both.
Well, I think at first it's all about being a risk taker. To be an entrepreneur, you just have to have balls and just fucking throw inhibition to the wind. Once you get to a certain point, yeah, I could see possibly switching over to more of a risk mitigator. But if you never take the risk in the first place and you're always weighing pros and cons and this and that, well, you're going to psych yourself out and you're never going to take that first step anyways. Sometimes you just have to say, screw it, let's do it.
80-20 rule.
Yeah.
As long as you have 80% of the information, just go.
Boom. That's all I got for that. Short, sweet, to the point.
Yeah, I like
Just
it.
like my love life.
Letters.
All right.